A successful executive takes a call during a meeting and hears on the other end of the line his daughter's weak voice pleading for food. The girl reveals she has been locked up for days, forbidden to eat by her stepmother, who hides cruelty behind impeccable elegance. Upon rescuing her, the father discovers a scene of silent abuse, fueled by psychological control, manipulation, and starvation. What begins as an unexpected call transforms into a battle for justice, where a father's love confronts and dismantles a facade of perfection. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll continue. The conference room on the 18th floor seemed to float above the city of London. From there, through the floor-to-ceiling mirrored windows, one could see the grey, pulsating immensity of the metropolis, stretching as far as the eye could reach. Commercial buildings mingled with antennas, flyovers cut the horizon like urban scars, and the traffic below moved in slow motion, forming a dense river of metal and impatience. But for the men and women seated around that oval table of noble wood, none of that mattered. Inside, the world was made of numbers, projections, quarterly targets, and expectations that never slept. Roderick Sampson adjusted his tie as he watched the graph climb on the projection screen. At 42, he had achieved everything a young executive from a humble family could dream of. Graduating in business administration from Oxford University, with an MBA completed in record time, he climbed the ranks of the technology company, where he worked with a dedication that bordered on obsession. Regional manager, then director of operations, and now vice president of strategy. His name was respected, his phone rang constantly, his schedule was always packed. Success had a price, and Roderick paid that price every day without question. Beside him, seated with impeccable posture, was Vivian Munro, financial director, and his main ally in the recent presentations to international investors. She was flipping through an extensive report, while the company president, a grey-haired man with a deep voice, spoke about expansion into the Canadian market. Vivian occasionally looked up, jotted something down on her tablet, and refocused. Roderick admired that ability to concentrate. He himself prided himself on possessing the same kind of discipline, that ability to shut out the outside world and completely immerse himself in work. The meeting had already lasted almost 3 hours. Coffee cooled in white porcelain cups, untouched sandwiches on silver trays, mineral water bottles aligned with millimeter precision. Everything there breathed efficiency, control, order. Roderick opened his Italian leather briefcase and took out a set of documents he had prepared the night before. They were financial projections for the next semester, optimistic and pessimistic scenarios, colorful graphs showing growth in all areas. He took a deep breath, preparing to present, when he felt his mobile phone vibrate in the inner pocket of his jacket. Normally, he would ignore it. Meetings of that level demanded total attention, and Roderick had the strict habit of silencing his device before entering any conference room. But something about that insistent vibration bothered him. Perhaps it was intuition. Perhaps it was just an involuntary reflex. But he discreetly took out his phone and looked at the screen. The number that appeared was unknown, but the area code was from London. Roderick frowned. Unexpected calls rarely brought good news. He returned the phone to his pocket, trying to regain focus. The president was now talking about exchange rate risks, inflation in Latin America, variables that needed to be controlled. Vivian was frantically taking notes. Roderick tried to keep up, but the vibration returned. This time, longer. Someone was insisting. He looked again. The same number. His heart quickened slightly, and he felt a growing discomfort in his chest. It wasn't common to receive repeated calls like this. He thought of his daughter, Laura, only 7 years old. He thought of school, of an accident, of a medical emergency. But no, the school had Patricia's number, his wife. If something was wrong, they would call her first, Patricia. Roderick didn't like to think about her during work. Married for 3 years, they maintained a relationship that from the outside seemed perfect. She was elegant, educated, always well-dressed, always with the right words on the tip of her tongue. She came from a traditional family in Belgravia, studied at renowned private schools, and had a network of contacts that impressed even the most cynical. When Roderick met her, 2 years after losing his first wife, he felt he had found someone who could bring stability back into his life and, most importantly, into Laura's life. Roderick's first wife, Marina, had passed away when Laura was only 3 years old. A sudden illness, treatments that didn't work, hopes that slipped away like sand through his fingers. Roderick preferred not to keep many details of those dark months in his memory. What mattered was that Marina was gone, and he was left alone with a small child, a demanding career, and a void that seemed never to diminish. It was in this context that Patricia appeared. She was a friend of a colleague, participated in charity events, frequented the same social circles that Roderick was beginning to integrate into. The relationship was quick, almost practical. He needed a companion. She seemed genuinely interested. They married in a discreet ceremony, and Patricia took on the role of Laura's stepmother with a naturalness that at the time seemed comforting. But there was something Roderick could never quite define. A subtle coldness in Patricia's eyes when she looked at Laura, a veiled impatience when the girl asked for attention, small gestures that Roderick initially attributed to the natural adaptation process. After all, it wasn't easy to enter the life of a child who still carried the memory of her biological mother. He convinced himself that with time things would improve, and he plunged even deeper into work, leaving Patricia to take care of the house, the routine of Laura. The phone vibrated a third time. Now Roderick could no longer ignore it. He discreetly stood up, muttering an apology that was met with slightly irritated glances around the table. He left the conference room, closed the door behind him, and walked to the silent corridor leading to the elevators. He answered the call with a drier tone than he intended. "Hello." On the other end of the line there was silence, a heavy, charged silence that made Roderick's stomach clench. He was about to hang up when he heard it. A voice, small, weak, trembling. A voice he would know anywhere, under any circumstances. "Daddy." The world stopped. The corridor, the elevators, the distant hum of the air conditioning, everything disappeared. Roderick felt his blood run cold. "Laura, honey, is that you? What happened?" The girl's breathing was irregular, broken. She seemed to be holding back tears, trying to be brave, but failing. "Daddy, I'm hungry." The words were simple, but they carried a weight Roderick couldn't immediately process. He tried to organize his thoughts. "Hungry? But what do you mean, Laura? Where's Patricia? Didn't you have lunch?" "No, Daddy, I haven't eaten anything since the day before yesterday." The floor seemed to move under Roderick's feet. He leaned his hand against the cold wall, trying to steady himself. "What do you mean, since the day before yesterday? Laura, where are you? What's going on?" "I'm in my room, Daddy. The door is locked. I can't get out." "Locked? Who locked you in there?" "Aunt Patricia said I need to learn to behave, that I'm stubborn, that I waste too much food. She said I'll stay here until I learn." Roderick felt rage rise like a hot, violent wave. He gripped the phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Laura, listen to me. I'm coming right now. Do you hear me? I'm going to get you out of there. Stay calm, okay? Daddy's coming." "Daddy, she'll be angry. She said if I tell you it'll be worse." The girl's voice was breaking, and Roderick needed all his strength not to scream. He took a deep breath, trying to sound as calm as possible. "It won't be worse, my love. I promise. Did you use the house phone to call me?" "I used—" "The housekeeper's. She forgot it in the kitchen. I managed to sneak out really quickly when Aunt Patricia left. Can you stay safe until I get there?" "Yes, Daddy. Then stay there. I'm leaving now. I won't be long." Roderick hung up and stood still for a few seconds, trying to process what he had just heard. His daughter, locked in her room, without food, by Patricia's order. The woman he had brought into his home, whom he had trusted to care for Laura, was doing this. He felt a mixture of guilt, fury, and despair. How had he not noticed? How had he let things get to this point? He returned to the conference room, interrupting the president mid-sentence. All eyes turned to him, some surprised, others visibly irritated by the intrusion. "Excuse me, family emergency. I need to go now." Vivian raised her eyebrows, concerned. "Roderick, the presentation is scheduled for 15 minutes from now. The investors are already arriving." "I know, I'm sorry, but it's urgent. Vivian, can you cover for me?" "But Roderick—" He was already leaving, grabbing his briefcase, his jacket, his car keys. There was no time for explanations, no room for negotiation. His daughter needed him and nothing else mattered. The drive to the car park was a blur. He got into his car, started the engine and sped off, ignoring speed limits, cutting through traffic with an urgency that bordered on desperation. The house was in a gated community in South London, about 40 minutes away under normal conditions. Roderick made the journey in 25, running amber lights, accelerating on straight roads, his heart beating erratically. As he drove, his mind raced. How had he missed the signs? In recent months, Laura had been quieter, more withdrawn. He had attributed it to natural shyness to the process of growing up. But what if it was more than that? What if she had been trying to ask for help and he, too busy with spreadsheets and meetings, hadn't been listening? Roderick remembered the few meals he had at home. Patricia always served elaborate dishes, but Laura ate little. He thought it was a child's lack of appetite. Now, the truth hurt like a stab. Was she being prevented from eating? Had this been going on for longer, and he simply hadn't noticed? He arrived at the gated community, sped past the guardhouse without stopping, waving quickly at the confused security guard, and parked crookedly in front of the house, occupying 2 spaces. He got out of the car and ran to the front door. He used his key, entered. The house was silent, a heavy, oppressive silence. The smell of fresh flowers came from the arrangement on the hall table. Everything was impeccable, clean, organized, but that perfection now seemed a grotesque mask, hiding something rotten. "Patricia!" He shouted her name, climbing the stairs 2 steps at a time. He reached the second-floor corridor where Laura's room was. The door was closed. Roderick tried to open it, but it was locked from the outside. He felt bile rise in his throat. "Laura, Laura, it's Daddy, I'm here." From the other side, he heard a faint movement, a shuffling of small feet. The girl's voice was muffled, almost inaudible. "Daddy?" "Yes, my love, I'm here. I'm going to open this door, okay?" Roderick looked around, searching for the key. It wasn't hanging in its usual place. He ran downstairs, went to the kitchen, rummaged through drawers. Nothing. He went back to the corridor, looked on top of the doorframe, inside decorative vases. That's when he heard calm footsteps coming from the master suite. Patricia emerged, wearing a beige-tailored suit, her hair pulled back in a perfect bun, light makeup, and a serene expression. "Roderick, what a surprise. I didn't know you were coming home now." Her voice was calm, almost sweet, but her eyes held something different, something cold, calculated. "Where's the key to Laura's room?" Patricia tilted her head slightly, as if dealing with a trivial situation. "She's in her room because she was misbehaving. She needs to learn boundaries, Roderick. You're not here all the time to see what I deal with." He took 2 steps towards her, and Patricia instinctively recoiled. "You locked my daughter in her room, without food, for 3 days. She sighed, as if dealing with an understandable misunderstanding. "It wasn't quite like that. She's dramatic. You know how children are, they exaggerate everything. She ate, just not as much as she wanted. She's used to being spoiled." Roderick felt rage explode, but forced himself to keep his voice controlled. "Give me the key. Now." Patricia crossed her arms, maintaining her haughty posture. "You're overreacting. This is education, Roderick. Discipline. Something you should support, instead of undermine." He advanced, took the handbag from the bedside table next to her, and rummaged through it. Patricia tried to protest, but he ignored her. He found a bunch of keys, grabbed them, and ran back to Laura's room. He tried several until one fit. The door opened. What he saw made him stop breathing for a moment. Laura was sitting in the corner of the room, leaning against the wall, clutching a rag doll that had belonged to her mother. She was too pale, with dark circles too deep for a 7-year-old. Her face was thin, her lips chapped, her eyes wide and frightened. The room, which should have been a colorful refuge, was stuffy, with the curtains drawn, no natural light. There were toys on the shelves, but all untouched, as if they were just decoration. Roderick knelt in front of his daughter, touched her cold face and felt tears burn his own eyes. "My love, what has she done to you?" Laura looked at the door, where Patricia stood, observing the scene with an expression that tried to be neutral but failed. The girl hesitated, afraid. "You can speak, Laura. Daddy's here. She won't do anything to you." The girl began to cry softly, holding the doll tightly. "She said I'm a burden, that I waste the family's money, that I'm ungrateful, that Mommy left because I was difficult." Every word was a blade cutting Roderick's heart. He hugged his daughter, feeling her body too thin, too fragile. "None of that is true. You are not a burden. You are the most important thing in my life. Your mother loved you more than anything, and I love you too. I'm so sorry, Laura. I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner." He stood up carrying the girl in his arms and walked past Patricia without looking. He went downstairs, grabbed the bag with Laura's documents, her health insurance card, and left the house. Patricia followed him, trying to argue, her voice beginning to lose its calm. "Roderick, you're making a mistake. This is a tantrum. She knows how to manipulate. You'll see. She'll twist you around her finger and you'll regret it." He put Laura in the back seat, buckled her seatbelt, and got into the car. Patricia knocked on the window. "Roderick, listen to me." He started the car and drove off without looking back. Laura was quiet, clutching her doll, looking out the window with eyes that had already seen things no child should see. Roderick drove straight to St. Thomas's Hospital, the best he knew. He entered through the emergency room, requesting urgent pediatric care. The medical team was quick. They took Laura to an examination room, measured her vital signs, asked questions. Roderick answered what he knew, what he had discovered, what he feared. The pediatrician, a woman with a serious and compassionate gaze, returned half an hour later with an expression that confirmed Roderick's worst fears. "Mr. Sampson, your daughter is dehydrated and malnourished. Tests show she has undergone significant food deprivation in recent days. There are signs of intense emotional stress. We will need to admit her for hydration and monitoring. I also recommend psychological evaluation." Roderick swallowed hard, trying to process it. "Will she be okay?" "Yes, with proper care, physical recovery is a matter of time, but the emotional aspect will need attention. What happened to her?" Roderick told his story. The doctor listened with increasing attention, taking notes. "Mr. Sampson, this constitutes severe neglect. I will need to contact the hospital's social services and possibly the competent authorities. It's protocol in such cases." Roderick nodded. He knew this was just the beginning. He knew he would have to face a legal, emotional, social battle. But he looked at Laura, now lying on a stretcher, receiving saline solution, and knew he would do whatever it took. That night, while Laura slept under the care of the medical team, Roderick made a call. He looked up the name of a family lawyer a colleague had recommended years ago in a casual conversation about complicated divorces. He never imagined he would one day need that contact. Dr. Marcus Fleming answered on the second ring, listened to Roderick's account with professional attention, and at the end paused for what seemed like an eternity. "Mr. Sampson, what you've described to me is serious, very serious, but I need to be honest. Proving emotional neglect and psychological abuse is complex, especially when the accused person has a good reputation and resources. We will need solid evidence, witnesses, documentation. It will be a long journey." Roderick looked through the hospital room window, seeing the city lights blink in the dark night. "I don't care how long it takes. I want my daughter protected, and I want the truth to come out." "Then let's start first thing tomorrow morning. Prepare yourself, Mr. Sampson. This will change your life." Roderick hung up and returned to his daughter's side. He held her small, fragile hand and made a silent promise. He wouldn't let this go. No matter the cost, no matter the time, he would fight. For Laura, for Marina's memory, for everything he had let slip away by being too busy to see. Outside the hospital, the city continued to pulsate. Millions of lives following their courses, oblivious to the drama unfolding in that fluorescent-lit room. But for Roderick, The world had completely changed, and there was no going back. Laura slowly opened her eyes, still sleepy. She saw her father beside her, and for the first time in a long time, managed something that could be the beginning of a smile. "Daddy, you stayed." Roderick gently squeezed her hand. "I'll always stay, Laura. Always." And at that moment, amidst the smell of the hospital and the constant beep of monitors, the reconstruction of something that had been broken began. A bond that would need time, care, and courage to be restored, but which, for the first time in years, had a real chance to flourish again. As Laura fell back asleep, Roderick sat there in the uncomfortable chair, planning the next steps. He knew that difficult days, painful revelations, and inevitable confrontations lay ahead. But he also knew with a certainty that burned in his chest that he would not give up. Not this time. Never again. The night advanced, and with it, the promise of a new day. A day that would bring answers, battles, and, who knows, the justice Laura deserved. The first rays of sun entered through the hospital room window, tinging the white walls with orange hues. Roderick hadn't slept. He spent the entire night there, sitting in the reclining armchair beside Laura's bed, observing his daughter's every movement, every breath, every small tremor during her sleep. The medical team had checked on them hourly, verifying vital signs, changing the IV bag, adjusting blankets. Laura was stable, but her fragility was still visible in every detail of her small body. Around 6 in the morning, a nurse brought coffee and cheese bread. Roderick thanked her with a nod but couldn't eat. His stomach was tight, clenched by a mixture of guilt and anxiety that wouldn't leave him in peace. He picked up his phone and saw 17 unread messages. Most were from Vivian, asking what had happened, if everything was all right, if he needed anything. There were also 3 messages from Patricia. He didn't open any of them. He didn't want to read them, didn't want to know. The mere thought of seeing her name on the screen made him feel a rage he needed to control. At 7:30, Laura began to stir. She slowly opened her eyes, blinking against the soft morning light. She looked around, disoriented, until her eyes found Roderick. He immediately stood up, approached, and gently touched her face. "Good morning, my love. How are you feeling?" Laura tried to speak, but her voice was hoarse. Roderick grabbed a glass of water and helped her drink small sips. After a few moments, she managed to respond. "I'm better, Daddy. My head still hurts a little. The doctor said it's normal. You were dehydrated. But now you're receiving IV fluids, and you'll be good soon." Laura nodded, clutching the rag doll she hadn't let go of even in her sleep. Roderick sat on the edge of the bed, choosing his words carefully. "Laura, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me, okay? You don't need to be afraid. No matter what you say, I'll be by your side." The girl looked at him with wide, still, frightened eyes. "Okay. How long has Aunt Patricia been doing this to you? Locking you in your room, not letting you eat?" Laura looked away, nervously fiddling with the doll's hair. It took her a few seconds to respond. "For a long time, Daddy. I don't know exactly. It started slowly. She would say I ate too much, that I was getting chubby. Then she started saying I was ill-behaved, that I didn't know how to behave. Then she started leaving me in my room when you weren't there." Roderick felt his chest tighten. "And you never told me why." Laura finally looked at him, and her eyes were filled with tears. She said, "If I told you, you'd be angry with me, that you'd think I was lying, that you'd send me away." The tears began to fall, silently, and Roderick hugged her with all the gentleness he could muster. "Laura, I would never do that, never. You are my daughter. I love you more than anything in this world, and I'm so sorry for not noticing. I should have seen. I should have paid more attention." "It's not your fault, Daddy. You work a lot. That's no excuse. Nothing is more important than you, nothing." They stayed like that for a long moment, embraced, as the sun slowly rose in the London sky and the city awoke to another frantic day. At 9 o'clock, Dr. Marcus Fleming arrived at the hospital. He was a man in his 50s with grey, hair combed back, discreet framed glasses, and an impeccable navy blue suit. He carried a leather briefcase under his arm and had a serious but not hostile expression. Roderick met him in the corridor outside Laura's room. "Mr. Sampson, good morning. How is your daughter?" "Stable. The doctors said she will recover physically, but they will need to monitor her emotional side." Marcus nodded, pulling a notepad from his briefcase. "I understand. I'm here so we can start documenting everything. We need a detailed account of what happened, all the facts, anything that can serve as evidence. I'll also need to speak with the medical team, get copies of the reports and exams, and if possible, I'll ask for a social worker to speak with Laura." Roderick agreed, though he felt a pang in his chest, imagining Laura having to relive all that. "She's just a child. I don't want this to be too traumatic. I understand, and we will do it as sensitively as possible, but it's necessary, Mr. Sampson. If we want to ensure your daughter is protected and that the responsible party answers for what she did, we need concrete evidence. Her testimony is essential." Throughout the morning, Marcus spoke with the doctor who had treated Laura the night before, with the nursing staff, and requested access to her medical records. Everything was recorded, photographed, filed. Roderick observed every movement with a mixture of relief and anguish. He was doing the right thing, but he knew this was just the beginning of a long and painful process. Around noon, a hospital social worker named Beatrice entered Laura's room. She was a friendly-looking woman with curly hair tied in a ponytail and carried a case with playful materials. She explained to Roderick that she would talk to Laura lightly, using drawings and games to make her more comfortable. Roderick agreed to leave the room during the conversation, although every fiber of his being wanted to stay and protect his daughter. He waited in the corridor, pacing back and forth, unable to stand still. Marcus was on the phone talking to someone, taking notes. Roderick looked at his phone again, and this time opened Patricia's messages. The first was short, sent around midnight. "Roderick, we need to talk, you're overreacting." The second, sent at 3 in the morning. "I know you're upset, but you're making a mountain out of a molehill. Laura is dramatic, always has been." The third, sent at 6 in the morning. "If you don't come back with her, you'll regret it. I have my rights too. I'm married to you. This house is mine." Roderick felt nauseous. The calculated coldness in the words, the complete lack of empathy or concern for Laura, the attempt at manipulation. He blocked the number and put his phone away. 40 minutes later, Beatrice came out of the room. Her face was more serious than when she entered. She signaled for Roderick and Marcus to follow her to a small reserved room in the corridor. "Mr. Sampson, I spoke with Laura. She is a very intelligent girl and unfortunately very frightened. What she told me is serious, very serious." Beatrice opened a notebook where she had made notes and also some drawings Laura had made during the conversation. She reported that her stepmother frequently locked her in her room, sometimes for hours, other times for days. She said she couldn't get food on her own, that she had to ask permission, and that often permission was denied. She said she was called offensive names, that she was negatively compared, that to other children, that she was accused of being to blame for her mother's absence. Roderick closed his eyes, taking a deep breath to avoid losing control. Beatrice showed one of the drawings. It was made with colored pencils, childish strokes, but the content was disturbing. It showed a small figure in a dark room behind a door with a padlock drawn on it. Outside, an adult figure with long hair, an elegant dress, but with an expression Laura had tried to represent as cold and distant. She drew this when I asked her to show how she felt at home. She said this is her room, and this is Aunt Patricia. Marcus noted everything, asking specific questions. Beatrice responded that Laura also mentioned an employee who tried to help her, but who suddenly left. Roderick immediately remembered Mrs. Celia, the housekeeper who had worked in the house for years, since before Patricia arrived. She had abruptly resigned a few months ago. At the time, Patricia said Celia had found a better job. Roderick didn't question it. Once again, he didn't question it. "I need to talk to Celia. She might have important information." Marcus agreed. "I'll need her contact." "That information. If she testifies, it could make a huge difference in the case. Roderick grabbed his phone and searched through old contacts. He found Celia's number and dialed. It rang several times before a tired voice answered. "Hello? Mrs. Celia, it's Roderick. Roderick Sampson, sorry to bother you." There was a pause on the other end. "Mr. Roderick, is everything all right?" "Mrs. Celia, I need to talk to you. It's about Laura." Another pause, longer this time. When Celia spoke again, her voice was trembling. "Mr. Roderick, I can't talk about it." "Please, Mrs. Celia, my daughter is in the hospital. She told me what was happening. I know you saw things. I need your help." Celia began to cry softly on the other end of the line. "I tried to help, Mr. Roderick. I swear I tried. But Mrs. Patricia fired me. She said if I told anyone anything, she would invent that I stole from her. I'm scared. I have a family to support. I couldn't risk it." Roderick felt the anger rise again. "You won't have any problems, Mrs. Celia. I promise. But I need you to help me protect Laura. Please." There was a long silence. Finally, Celia sighed. "Where are you, sir?" "At St. Thomas's Hospital. Can you come here?" "I can. I'll come now." She hung up, and Roderick felt a glimmer of hope. Marcus also seemed satisfied. If she confirms what Laura said, we'll have an adult testimony. That changes everything. While waiting for Celia, Roderick returned to Laura's room. The girl was eating a light soup that the nutrition team had prepared. She ate slowly, with small spoonfuls, but at least she was eating. Roderick sat beside her, observing. "Did you like the soup?" "It's good, Daddy. It's been a long time since I've had anything hot." The simplicity of the phrase was devastating. Roderick swallowed the lump in his throat. "From now on, you'll eat whatever you want, whenever you want. I promise." Laura gave a small smile, and that was enough for Roderick to feel he was on the right track. Mrs. Celia arrived at the hospital around 3 in the afternoon. She was a woman in her 60s, short, with grey hair and hands calloused from work. She wore simple clothes, a floral blouse and faded jeans. When she saw Roderick, her eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Roderick, how is the little girl?" "She'll be okay, but she's been through a lot." "I know, I saw." Marcus introduced himself and led Celia to the same small room where he had spoken with Beatrice. There, he explained the situation, asked Celia to recount everything she had seen and experienced while working in the house. Roderick stood by, listening to every word with a mixture of horror and validation. Celia started slowly, choosing her words, but soon the floodgates opened. She recounted that Patricia had always treated Laura coldly, but that in recent months the situation had drastically worsened. It started with small cruelties, denying a toy, a dessert, an outing. Then it escalated to disproportionate punishments, locking Laura in her room for hours because she had spilled juice, prohibiting her from coming down for dinner because she hadn't finished her homework on time, and finally food deprivation. She said the girl needed to learn to control herself, that she was getting spoiled. I tried to give Laura food secretly, but Mrs. Patricia found out. She called me a busybody, said I was sabotaging the child's education. The next day, she gave me a letter of resignation and a sum of money. She said if I said anything to anyone, she would accuse me of theft. I was scared. I have a family to support. I couldn't risk it. Roderick placed his hand on Celia's shoulder. "You did what you could, and now you're doing the right thing." Marcus recorded the testimony, had Celia sign a statement, and assured her that she would be legally protected. With that, the case began to take on more solid contours. In the following days, the situation unfolded rapidly. Laura was discharged from the hospital, but Roderick did not take her back to the house. Instead, he rented a furnished apartment in Richmond, a quiet, leafy neighborhood, far from Patricia and the bad memories. Marcus filed a legal action seeking full custody of Laura, as well as a protective order preventing Patricia from approaching the child. He also formally reported the case of neglect and abuse to social services and the Crown Prosecution Service. Patricia, in turn, hired one of the most expensive lawyers in London, a man known for defending impossible cases and winning. He filed a counteraction, alleging that Roderick was lying, manipulating his daughter, using her as a weapon in a supposed invented marital conflict. He claimed that Patricia was an exemplary stepmother who cared for Laura with dedication and that everything was just an exaggeration from a spoiled child. The legal battle began. Hearings, testimonies, expert evaluations. Roderick had to temporarily step away from work, taking unpaid leave. Vivian, his colleague, took on many of his responsibilities and occasionally called to see how he was doing. Roderick appreciated the support, but lived for Laura and the legal process. A child psychologist named Beatrice was appointed by the court to evaluate Laura. She visited the apartment in Richmond, spoke with the girl in several sessions, administered projective tests, and observed the interaction between father and daughter. Her report was clear. Laura showed signs of emotional trauma consistent with psychological abuse and neglect. She recommended intensive therapy and that the child remain under her father's care. Meanwhile, investigators from social services visited the house where Laura had lived. They examined her bedroom, the pantry, the purchase records. They found exactly what Roderick suspected. A room set up like a display, full of toys still in their packaging, but with no signs of actual use. The pantry was full of imported wines, expensive, cheeses, sophisticated foods, but nothing suitable for a child. Receipts showed extremely high expenses on designer clothes, aesthetic treatments and decoration, but practically nothing on children's items in the last 6 months. The social worker who accompanied the inspection also reported that Laura's bedroom door lock could only be opened from the outside with a key, a detail Patricia tried to justify as being for security, but which the social worker considered highly suspicious. Marcus presented all this to the judge overseeing the case. With each new piece of evidence, Patricia's narrative crumbled a little more. But she did not give up. Her lawyer argued that Roderick was an absent father, who worked too much, who was never present in his daughter's life, and who now wanted to use Laura to get rid of a marriage that wasn't working. It was during one of the hearings that Marcus had an idea. He requested a technical forensic examination of the house, focusing on the electronic systems. Patricia and her lawyer protested, but the judge granted the request. A forensic technology expert went to the residence and extracted the records from the security system and the biometric access control installed on the doors. What he found was devastating. The records showed that over the past 3 months, Laura's bedroom door had been locked for periods of 5, 6, sometimes 8 consecutive hours, always during the day when Roderick was at work. The kitchen's biometric access system was configured to block Laura's fingerprint, preventing her from entering alone. The security cameras, which Patricia insisted did not record for privacy reasons, actually had an automatic cloud backup that she was unaware of. The expert managed to access it. The images were silent, in black and white, but terrifyingly eloquent. They showed Laura trying to open her bedroom door, pushing, lightly knocking, giving up. They showed her walking downstairs barefoot, trying to open the kitchen door, pressing her face against the glass, looking at the refrigerator on the other side, and returning defeated. They showed her sitting on the corridor floor, clutching her doll, waiting. When these images were presented in court, the silence was absolute. Not even Patricia's lawyer could argue against them. They were undeniable, recorded, dated, irrefutable evidence. Marcus also presented another disturbing discovery. Patricia's computer browsing history, extracted with judicial authorization, showed searches for child behavioral control, effects of food, restriction on children, extreme discipline techniques, and even online forums about how to deal with problematic stepchildren. Everything pointed to a premeditated, intentional pattern. The court scheduled a final hearing where Patricia would be heard directly by the judge. Roderick was present, sitting beside Marcus, his heart pounding. Laura was at home, under the care of a trusted nanny Roderick had hired. Patricia entered the courtroom impeccably, as always. Grey dress, high heels, perfectly styled hair, discreet makeup. But when she began to speak, something changed. The judge asked direct questions, confronting her with the evidence. She tried to maintain her composure, but the mask began to crack. Her voice became sharper, her answers more defensive. And then, pressured about the videos and biometric records, she exploded. That girl was a problem from the start, always wanting attention, always crying for her dead mother, always looking at me as if I were an intruder. I just wanted her to learn to behave, to stop being so needy, so clingy. I tried to educate her, but she's impossible. Her lawyer tried to interrupt her, but Patricia didn't stop. Roderick was never home. I had to deal with her alone every day, while he lived at the office. And now he wants to blame me. She's his daughter, not mine. I didn't ask to be that child's mother. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia realized too late what she had said. Her lawyer covered his face with his hands. Marcus looked at Roderick, and both knew that this had been the final blow. The judge, a middle-aged man with a severe expression, called for a recess. When he returned, his decision was clear. He declared Patricia guilty of severe neglect, emotional abuse, and psychological ill-treatment. He determined that she would be criminally prosecuted, prohibited from approaching Laura, and would lose all rights to the child. Roderick would receive full and exclusive custody. Patricia left the courtroom escorted, visibly shaken. Roderick remained seated, processing everything. He had won. Laura was protected. But the victory had a bitter taste because none of it would bring back the lost time, the days his daughter suffered in silence while he was too busy to see. When he returned home, Laura was drawing at the living room table. She looked up and asked in a small voice, "Daddy, is Aunt Patricia coming back?" Roderick knelt in front of her, holding her hands. "No, my love, she's not coming back. Never again. You are safe now, and I'm going to do everything differently. I promise." Laura hugged her father, and for the first time in a long time, Roderick felt he was in the right place, doing the right thing. The journey had been long, painful, but necessary, and now, finally, they could begin to rebuild. Together. The first few months after the trial were a period of intense adjustment. Roderick had made drastic decisions to reorganize his life, and each of them required courage, sacrifice, and a determination he hadn't known he possessed until he was forced to find it. The first change was to permanently leave the house where Laura had suffered. The rented apartment in Richmond was only temporary, an emergency refuge. Roderick wanted a new beginning, a place where there were no ghosts, where every room didn't carry bad memories. He looked for properties in quiet, tree-lined neighborhoods, close to parks and schools. He wanted Laura to grow up in a light, safe environment, where she could finally just be a child. He found an apartment in Islington, in an old but well-maintained building, with a friendly concierge and neighbors who seemed to form a small community. It had 3 bedrooms, a spacious living room with plenty of natural light, and a balcony overlooking a tree-lined square where children played on weekends. When he showed Laura the place, she walked through the empty rooms, touching the walls, looking out the window, and finally smiled. A shy but genuine smile. For Roderick, that was the sign he was making the right choice. The move was quick. Roderick didn't want to take much from the old house. He bought new furniture, simple but cozy. He let Laura choose the colors for her room, the sheets, the curtains, the pictures for the walls. She chose shades of blue and yellow, colors that, according to the psychologist, represented hope and lightness. Roderick hired a painter, bought shelves for the children's books he began to acquire, and set up a reading nook by the window, with soft cushions and a gentle light. He wanted that room to be a sanctuary for Laura, a place where she felt protected and loved. The second big change was at work. Roderick knew he couldn't continue with the same frantic routine as before. The company had been understanding during the judicial process, granting leave and allowing him to be absent when necessary. But now, with full custody of Laura, he needed something more flexible. He requested a meeting with the company president and went straight to the point. He explained that he needed to reduce his workload, work more from home, be present in his daughter's life. He knew this could cost him his position, his bonuses, perhaps even his job. But he was willing to accept the consequences. To his surprise, the president was understanding. He offered a reorganization of Roderick's responsibilities, allowing him to work in a hybrid regime, 3 days a week in the office and 2 at home. There would be a salary reduction, but nothing that would compromise his financial stability. Roderick accepted immediately. Vivian, who had always been a silent ally, took on some of the more urgent demands and became a kind of bridge between Roderick and the board. She never asked for anything in return, never made Roderick feel indebted. She just said once, during a quick coffee break, "You're doing the right thing, your daughter needs you, we'll sort out the rest." With the new routine established, Roderick began to experience something he hadn't experienced in years: presence. He took Laura to school every morning, waited at the gate at the end of the day, attended parent-teacher meetings, got to know her teachers, knew who her best friends were, which subjects she liked, which made her more anxious. He discovered that Laura loved to draw, that she had a fertile imagination for inventing stories, that she liked to watch birds in the square and give names to each of them. Small things Roderick had never known because he had never truly been present. Laura's therapy became an essential part of the routine. Beatrice, the psychologist who had evaluated the girl during the judicial process, continued to follow up with her twice a week. The sessions were in a clinic near the apartment, decorated with soft colors and educational toys. Beatrice worked playfully, using drawings, modeling clay, stories, and games to help Laura process the trauma. Roderick participated in some sessions, learning techniques to deal with difficult moments, such as the nightmares that still woke Laura in the middle of the night, or the episodes of anxiety when she encountered locked doors or enclosed spaces. There were nights when Roderick woke up to Laura's muffled screams. He would rush to her room, turn on the soft light of the bedside lamp, and find her clutching her rag doll, sweating, trembling, crying. He would pick her up, rock her gently, sing soft songs that Marina used to sing, and stay there until she fell back asleep. These were moments that broke Roderick's heart, but also strengthened him. Each night he managed to calm Laura. Each time she fell asleep safe in his arms was a small victory against the past. Beatrice explained that recovery would be gradual. Trauma didn't disappear overnight. There were layers that needed to be worked through, emotional wounds that would take time to heal. But she also noted progress. Laura began to draw more colorful, lighter things. Instead of dark rooms and locked doors, she began to draw gardens, dogs, rainbows. She began to smile more, to play with more spontaneity, to ask questions about the world around her, small achievements that, for Roderick, were monumental. However, not everything was easy. Laura still had difficulty trusting fully. Sometimes when Roderick had to leave for a meeting at the office, she would become anxious, repeatedly asking what time he would return, if he was sure he would return, if she could call if she needed him. Roderick bought her a children's watch, taught her to tell time, and began leaving notes around the house with affectionate messages and the promise that he would always come back. He created rituals: a good morning hug before leaving, a phone call in the middle of the afternoon, a good night hug before bed. Structures that gave Laura the security that she was not alone, that he would not disappear. School was also a fundamental part of her recovery. Laura had changed schools after the move, and Roderick chose an institution with a humanized approach, small classes, and teachers trained to deal with children who had experienced difficult situations. The pedagogical coordinator, Simone, was discreetly informed about Laura's history and began to follow her with special attention without making the girl feel different from the other children. Laura became friends with a classmate named Isabella, a cheerful and talkative girl who invited her to play during recess, shared snacks, and had a contagious energy. Roderick met Isabella's mother, Helen, during a school party, and the two families began to meet occasionally on weekends. Helen was divorced, raising Isabella alone, and understood the challenges of being a single parent. She and Roderick exchanged experiences, confidences, and laughter about their daughter's antics. It wasn't a romantic relationship, but a friendship that brought lightness to both of them. As the months passed, Roderick realized he was becoming a different person. More patient, more attentive, more connected with his own emotions. He had lived for years on autopilot, focused on professional goals, on material achievements, on an idea of success that now seemed empty and superficial. True success, he discovered, was in the nights Laura fell asleep peacefully, in the colorful drawings she hung on the refrigerator, in the spontaneous hugs she gave when he least expected it. But there were also moments of intense guilt. Roderick found himself replaying the signs he ignored, the times Laura tried to reach out and he was too busy to notice, the conversations that never happened because he came home late and she was already asleep. Therapy wasn't just for Laura. Roderick also began having sessions with a psychologist, recommended by Beatrice to process his own guilt, his grief over Marina's loss, and the mistakes he had made as a father. It was during one of these sessions that the psychologist, a calm and direct man named Paul, asked a question that unsettled Roderick. Are you punishing yourself, or are you rebuilding yourself? Roderick didn't know how to answer immediately. He thought about that question for days. He realized that in many moments he was so focused on compensating for the past that he forgot to live in the present. He was so worried about being the perfect father that he ended up putting too much pressure on himself, creating unrealistic expectations and getting frustrated when he couldn't meet them. Paul helped him understand that being a good father didn't mean being perfect. It meant being present, being honest, apologizing when he made mistakes, learning from his mistakes, and moving forward. Laura didn't need a perfect father. She needed a real father, who loved her unconditionally, who listened to her, who was by her side in good times and bad. This realization changed the way Roderick related to his daughter. He began to allow himself to make mistakes. There were days when he lost his patience because Laura spilled juice on the table for the third time. There were days when he was late picking her up from school because a meeting ran long, but instead of sinking into guilt, he would talk to Laura, apologize when necessary, explain that adults also make mistakes, and move on. And Laura, with that surprising childish wisdom, accepted, forgave, and continued. Roderick also began to talk about Marina more frequently. Initially, he avoided the subject, afraid of awakening pain in Laura. But Beatrice encouraged him to keep Marina's memory alive in a healthy way. Roderick put together a photo album with pictures of Marina, from her youth to her last days. He would sit with Laura, they would flip through it together, and Roderick would tell stories about her mother. How Marina liked to sing while cooking, how she had a habit of collecting seashells from the beach, how she laughed loudly, unashamedly when something amused her, how she loved Laura more than anything. Laura listened attentively, asking questions, smiling at some stories, crying at others. And little by little, Marina's figure ceased to be a painful ghost and became a gentle presence, a precious memory that connected father and daughter instead of separating them. One afternoon, as they walked through the square near their home, Laura asked, "Daddy, do you think Mommy is proud of me?" Roderick stopped, knelt in front of her and held her hands. "I am absolutely sure. She is incredibly proud. You are brave, intelligent, affectionate. Everything she dreamed you would be." Laura hugged her father, and Roderick felt that, at that moment, Marina was there with them in some way, approving, smiling, at peace. Months turned into a year. Laura turned 8, and Roderick organized a party at home, inviting her school friends Helen and Isabella, some neighbors, and even Beatrice, who had become more than a therapist, almost an aunt to Laura. The party was simple, with colorful decorations, chocolate cake, and games in the park. Laura laughed, ran, played, and Roderick watched from afar, his heart full. Mrs. Celia was also invited. She arrived shyly, bringing a carefully wrapped gift. Laura hugged her tightly, thanking her for trying to help her when no one else saw. Celia cried, said she didn't deserve gratitude, but Laura insisted. For the girl, Celia had been a ray of kindness in the darkness, and that would never be forgotten. At the end of the party, when everyone had left and Laura was exhausted but happy, Roderick put her to bed, tucked her in and sat beside her. "Daddy, this was the best birthday of my life." Roderick smiled, gently touching her face. "We'll have many more, my love. Many more." "And will you always be here?" "Always, Laura. I promise." She closed her eyes, clutching her rag doll, and fell asleep with a smile on her lips. Roderick stayed there for a few more minutes, watching her sleep. He thought of all they had been through, all the battles they had faced, all the times they almost gave up but kept going. He thought of Laura's strength, her resilience, her ability to forgive and rebuild. He thought of his own journey, the choices he had made, the mistakes he had committed, the lessons he had learned. He slowly left the room, carefully closed the door and went to the balcony. The night was calm, the square empty, the trees swaying gently in the wind. Roderick looked up at the sky, searching for stars among the city lights, and whispered to the universe, to Marina, to whoever was listening, thank you for giving me a second chance." The following months brought even more stability. Laura continued to progress in therapy, nightmares became rare, anxiety diminished. Roderick settled into his new work routine, finding a healthy balance between career and fatherhood. Vivian was promoted to director, and she and Roderick maintained a solid and respectful professional partnership. Helen and Isabella became constant presences in Roderick and Laura's lives, creating a kind of extended family that brought joy and mutual support. There were, of course, challenges. Laura still had difficult moments, days when sadness returned unannounced, when she remembered bad things and needed Roderick's support to get through. He learned to recognize the signs, to be present without suffocating, to give space when needed, and closeness when asked. Beatrice, during one of the sessions, commented to Roderick, "You've come a long way. Laura is becoming a strong, confident girl, and you have become the father she always needed." Roderick smiled, but there was genuine humility in his response. "I still have a lot to learn, but I'm trying, every day. And that's what matters. It's not perfection, it's constant effort, presence, love." Roderick left that session with a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. He picked Laura up from school and the two went to the square. They sat on their usual bench watching the birds Laura loved to name. She pointed to a sparrow perched on a nearby branch. "That's Peter. He comes here every day." Roderick laughed. "How do you know it's always the same one?" "Because I know him. Look at the little spot on his wing. It's him." Roderick observed the spot, doubting but pretending to believe. Laura continued narrating Peter's imaginary adventures, and Roderick just listened, smiling, grateful for every second of that ordinary but extraordinary moment. When the sun began to set, tinging the sky orange and pink, they walked home hand in hand. Laura talked about art class, about a drawing the teacher praised, about a new book she wanted to read. Roderick listened attentively, asking questions, laughing at the stories, fully living that present he had almost lost. Upon arriving home, Laura went to take a bath while Roderick prepared dinner. He had learned to cook simple but nutritious meals and discovered he liked the ritual of preparing food, knowing exactly what Laura was eating, sitting at the table and sharing. The meal without rush, without his phone, without distractions. During dinner, Laura asked a question that caught Roderick by surprise. "Daddy, do you still feel sad because of Aunt Patricia?" Roderick thought for a moment before answering, "I'm sad about what happened. Sad that you went through that, but I'm not sad that she left our lives. It was the best thing that could have happened." "I think so too. We're much better now, aren't we?" "Much better." Laura smiled, returning to her meal. And Roderick realized that the girl had overcome that trauma in a way he had never imagined possible. She was not defined by what she suffered. She was defined by the strength she found to move forward, by the ability to trust again, to love again, to live fully despite everything. That night, after putting Laura to bed, Roderick sat in the living room with a cup of tea. He looked around the apartment they had transformed into a home. He saw Laura's drawings taped to the wall, Marina's photos in scattered frames, toys organized in baskets, books stacked in the reading nook. He saw life, he saw love, he saw a new beginning. He picked up his phone and opened his photo album. He scrolled through the images of the past few months, Laura smiling in the park, Laura playing with Isabella, Laura blowing out her birthday candles, Laura sleeping, hugging her doll. Each photo was a precious memory, a record of a life being rebuilt brick by brick. Roderick thought about how everything could have been different if he had paid attention sooner, if he had listened to the signs, if he had put Laura first from the beginning. But he also understood that there was no point in living with regrets. The past could not be changed. What mattered was the present and the future he and Laura were building together. He saved his favorite photo as his wallpaper. It was of Laura laughing, hair in the wind, eyes sparkling, absolutely free. And Roderick knew that, no matter what came next, they would face it together. Because now he understood what truly mattered. It wasn't professional titles, it wasn't bank accounts, it wasn't external recognition. It was that girl sleeping in the next room. It was the chance to be present. It was the love that, despite everything, still bloomed. And with that thought, Roderick finally allowed himself to rest, knowing that he had done the right thing, that he was on the right path, and that the best was yet to come. 2 years had passed since that terrifying day when Roderick received Laura's call for help. 2 years that felt at the same time like an eternity and a blink of an eye. The life that father and daughter built together was completely different from the one they lived before, but not just because of external circumstances. The deepest transformation had happened within each of them, in the invisible layers that compose character, trust, the capacity to love and be loved. Laura was 9 years old now, and anyone who saw her walking down the street with her father, smiling as she told school stories, would never imagine what she had been through. She was a vibrant, curious girl, passionate about drawing and creating fantastic narratives where there was always a happy ending. Beatrice, who continued to see her monthly, said that Laura's recovery was one of the most beautiful she had ever witnessed. Not because the trauma had completely disappeared, but because Laura had learned to live with it, to transform it into strength instead of letting it define her. Roderick was also a different man. There was a serenity in him that hadn't existed before, a presence that went far beyond the physical. He learned to truly listen, to perceive silences, to be available not only with his body but with his mind and heart. He continued to work at the same company, but now with a completely different perspective on what success meant. Vivian had been promoted to vice president, and the two maintained a relationship of mutual respect and partnership. She occasionally joked that Roderick was the only executive who rushed out at 5 in the afternoon to pick up his daughter from school, but she said it with admiration, not criticism. It was on a normal Tuesday morning during breakfast that Laura made a comment that caught Roderick off guard. "Daddy, Aunt Helen has been different lately. Have you noticed?" Roderick was buttering a piece of toast and looked up, intrigued. "Different how?" "I don't know. Happier. She keeps smiling for no reason. Even Isabella commented on it." Roderick smiled, trying to hide it. In fact, he knew exactly what was happening. Helen had started dating a physical education teacher from the girls' school, a man named Philip, and was visibly radiant. But Roderick didn't know Laura had noticed. "People are happy sometimes, Laura. It doesn't need a specific reason." Laura bit into a piece of bread, thoughtful. "You're happier too, Daddy. Before you always seemed tired. Now you smile more." Roderick felt his heart clench in a good, warm way. He reached out and gently touched his daughter's face. "That's because I have you, my love. You taught me how to be truly happy." Laura smiled, one of those spontaneous, pure smiles that light up everything around her, and went back to eating. Roderick watched her for a few more moments, marveling at the incredible creature she was becoming, grateful for every second he had with her. That week, the school organized an art exhibition where students' works would be displayed for parents. Laura was thrilled because one of her drawings had been selected to be at the main entrance of the improvised gallery in the schoolyard. Roderick asked to leave work early, picked Laura up at home, and the two went to school together. Helen and Isabella were also there, and the four walked together through the corridors decorated with paintings, collages, clay sculptures, and other creative works. When they reached the entrance to the schoolyard, Roderick saw Laura's drawing displayed on a wooden easel, illuminated by an improvised spotlight. It was a vibrant watercolor full of warm colors. It showed a man and a girl holding hands, walking towards a horizon where the sun was rising. In the upper corner, written in Laura's neat handwriting, was the title, "New Beginning." Roderick felt his eyes sting. He stood there looking at that drawing, unable to speak. Laura tugged his hand, pulling him closer. "Did you like it, Daddy? I made it thinking of us." Roderick knelt down, getting to her level, and hugged her with all the strength he had. "It's perfect, Laura. It's the most beautiful drawing I've ever seen." The art teacher, a young woman named Carla approached, smiling. "Mr. Sampson, Laura is one of the most talented students I've ever had. She has a special gift for conveying emotion through colors. This drawing moved all of us when she presented it." Roderick thanked her, still visibly touched. Helen, beside him, also had tears in her eyes. She knew part of Roderick and Laura's story and understood the meaning of that drawing. At the end of the exhibition, as they were walking home, Laura asked, "Daddy, can I invite Isabella to sleep over here on Saturday?" Roderick smiled. "Of course you can. I'll arrange it with Aunt Helen." Laura celebrated, already planning everything they would do: popcorn, movies, games. Roderick watched his daughter's excitement and realized how much things had changed. Before, Laura lived in isolation, without close friends, without the freedom to simply be a child. Now she had solid friendships, confidence to express herself, and a home where she felt truly safe. That night, after Laura fell asleep, Roderick sat on the sofa with a cup of tea and turned on the television. A documentary about resilience was playing, about people who had overcome unimaginable adversities and managed to rebuild their lives. He watched for a few minutes, recognizing in the stories something he himself had lived. The journey was not linear. There were good days and bad days. There were moments of strength and moments of weakness. But what mattered was to keep going one step at a time without giving up. The phone rang, and Roderick answered. It was Marcus Fleming, the lawyer who had handled Laura's case. They didn't talk as frequently as before, but kept in occasional contact. "Roderick, how are you? Sorry to call so late." "No problem, Dr. Fleming. Did something happen?" "Actually, yes. I received a call from the Crown Prosecution Service. Patricia served her sentence. She was released from prison yesterday." Roderick felt a tightening in his chest. He knew this day would eventually come. Patricia had been sentenced to 3 years, but with good behavior it was reduced to 2. Even so, the news made him uneasy. Can she approach Laura? No. The protective order remains valid indefinitely. She is prohibited from approaching, making contact, or any interaction. If she tries, she will be arrested again. I'm just letting you know so you can be vigilant. Anything strange, any suspicious movement, call me immediately." Roderick thanked him and hung up. He sat in the dark, processing the information. Patricia was free. She no longer posed a direct danger, but the mere idea that she was in the same city, breathing the same air, deeply bothered him. He stood up, went to Laura's room, and stood at the door watching her sleep. The rag doll was still there, clutched as always. Laura was safe, and Roderick would do everything to keep her that way. The following days passed normally, but Roderick was more vigilant. He paid attention to his surroundings when he went out with Laura, checked if anyone was following them, locked the doors more carefully. He didn't tell Laura anything. He didn't want to scare her unnecessarily. Beatrice, when she found out, advised, "Roderick, it's natural for you to be worried, but don't let fear control your life. Keep living. Keep giving Laura the routine you've built. If something happens, you'll deal with it, but don't anticipate problems that may never arrive." Roderick knew she was right. Gradually he relaxed, returning to his normal rhythm, and nothing happened. No sign of Patricia, no strange movements. Life went on. On Saturday, Isabella spent the night at their house. The girls watched animated movies, made popcorn, played karaoke, and laughed late into the night. Roderick and Helen stayed in the living room, talking about various subjects. Helen talked about her relationship with Philip, about how happy she was but also hesitant to commit again after her divorce. Roderick listened attentively, shared his own experiences about rebuilding life after losses, and the two ended the night with a deeper connection, a friendship that was solidifying more and more. When Isabella left on Sunday morning, Laura was radiant. Roderick used the rest of the day to spend quality time with his daughter. They went to the park, rode bikes, had ice cream, and sat on their usual bench to watch the birds. Laura pointed to a sparrow that landed near them. "Look, Daddy, it's Peter. He still comes here." Roderick smiled. "He's loyal, that Peter. Just like you, Daddy, you're loyal. You never abandon me." Roderick felt a lump in his throat. He hugged Laura, kissed the top of her head and whispered, "I will never abandon you, Laura. Never. That's a promise I will keep until the end of my life." Laura was quiet for a moment, just enjoying the hug. Then she asked, "Daddy, do you think Mommy would be proud of who I am?" Roderick held her hands, looking into her eyes with all the sincerity he had. "Laura, your mother wouldn't just be proud. She would be amazed. You are brave, kind, talented, strong. Everything she dreamed you would be and much more. And you, Daddy, are you proud of me? More than words can express." Laura smiled, and in that smile, Roderick saw Marina. He saw the sweetness, the light, the purity, and he knew that in some way Marina lived on through her daughter, through the love they shared, through the family he was rebuilding with such dedication. The following weeks brought more news. Laura's school organized an essay competition on free themes, and Laura decided to write about overcoming adversity. Roderick helped her organize her ideas, but the text was entirely hers. She wrote about a girl who went through difficult times, but who found strength in her father's love and managed to start anew. She didn't mention specific details, but the emotion was palpable in every line. When the results came out, Laura won first place in her category. The award ceremony was held at the school with all the parents present. When Laura's name was called and she went on stage to receive her certificate, Roderick was in the front row, applauding loudly, tears streaming freely down his face. They were not tears of sadness, but of pride, of accomplishment, of gratitude. Laura read an excerpt from her essay into the microphone, her voice firm despite her shyness. "Sometimes life puts us in dark places, places where we think we'll never get out. But if we have someone who truly loves us, who holds our hand and shows us the light, we can do it. We always can." The audience applauded, moved. Roderick saw that he wasn't the only one crying. Several parents were visibly touched. Helen, beside him, squeezed his hand, and he silently thanked her for having people like her by his side. When they returned home that night, Laura was holding her certificate, with pride. Roderick hung it on the living room wall, next to the drawings and photos that already adorned the space. Each item there told a story, marked an achievement, celebrated a moment of joy. During dinner, Laura asked a question that surprised Roderick. "Daddy, do you think you'll ever date someone again?" Roderick almost choked on the water he was drinking. He coughed, recovered, and looked at Laura with a mixture of surprise and curiosity. "Why are you asking that?" "Just curious. Aunt Helen is dating, and I thought it was nice. She's happy. I thought maybe you could be happy like that too." Roderick thought carefully before answering. "Laura, I'm already happy, very happy. I have you, I have a job I like, I have friends. If one day I meet someone special, it's possible. But it's not a priority right now. My priority is you." "And if you do meet someone, you'll tell me, right? You won't hide it." Roderick smiled, touched by his daughter's maturity. "Of course I'll tell you. You are the most important person in my life. Everything that happens to me you will know." Laura seemed satisfied with the answer and went back to eating. Roderick thought about that conversation. The truth was, he hadn't thought about relationships since Patricia. The wound was still fresh, his trust shaken. But he also knew that eventually he might make room for love again. He was in no hurry. When the time was right, he would know. The months continued to pass, bringing small joys and daily challenges. Laura was promoted at school, won a medal in a drawing competition, and made new friends. Roderick was recognized at work for a successful project, receiving a bonus which he used to renovate the apartment, making it even more welcoming. Helen and Philip got engaged and invited Roderick and Laura to the celebration. It was a small, intimate party, full of genuine love and joy. Roderick saw Helen radiant and felt sincere happiness for her. Isabella was thrilled at the idea of having Philip as a stepfather, and the two families were uniting in a beautiful and healthy way. During the party, Philip pulled Roderick aside and said, "Man, I want to thank you. Helen told me how important you were to her during these years, how you supported each other. That means a lot." Roderick shook Philip's hand firmly. "Helen is an incredible person. Take good care of her and Isabella, they deserve it. You can count on it. That's the plan. And at that moment, Roderick felt he was witnessing something beautiful. People rebuilding lives, finding love again, forming new families. And that gave him hope that perhaps one day he too could have that. But for now he was complete with what he had. It was on a Sunday afternoon, almost 3 years after the revelation of the abuse, that Roderick received an unexpected letter. It came by mail with no sender, just a handwritten address. Roderick opened it cautiously. It was from Patricia. The letter was short, written on plain paper with a trembling hand he didn't recognize. She apologized. She said she had undergone intensive therapy, that she now understood the gravity of what she had done, that she would carry that guilt forever. She said she didn't expect forgiveness, that she didn't deserve it, but that she needed to express her regret. It ended by saying that she had moved to another city, that she would never attempt contact again, and that she wished Roderick and Laura happiness. Roderick read the letter 3 times, trying to feel something: anger, sadness, compassion, but all he felt was indifference. Patricia was part of a past he had overcome. Her apologies, sincere or not, changed nothing. Laura was safe, she was happy, she was healed. That was what mattered. He put the letter in a drawer, deciding that one day, when Laura was older, if she wanted to know, he would show her. But for now, there was no need. Patricia was no longer part of their lives, and so it should remain. That night, Roderick sat with Laura on the balcony. The sky was clear, and it was possible to see some stars despite the city's light pollution. Laura pointed to a particularly bright star. "Daddy, that one is Mommy, I'm sure." Roderick smiled, hugging his daughter. "Could be, and if it is, she's watching over us from up there. I think she's happy, because we're happy." Roderick kissed the top of Laura's head, feeling a deep peace fill his heart. "I think so too, my love. I think so too." They stayed there for a few more minutes, in comfortable silence, just enjoying each other's presence. And Roderick knew with absolute certainty that he had done the right thing, that all the sacrifices, all the battles, all the sleepless nights were worth it, because there, in that moment, he had everything that truly mattered. He had Laura. He had love. He had a second chance to be the father he should have always been. Life would continue to bring challenges, surprises, joys, and sorrows, but Roderick knew that as long as he had Laura by his side, as long as he could hold her, protect her, love her, everything would be all right, because in the end what defines a life is not the mistakes we make, but the courage we have to correct them. It's not the falls, but the determination to get up. It's not the darkness we face, but the light we choose to follow. And Roderick chose the light, every day, in every decision, in every hug, in every smile exchanged with Laura. This was his redemption. This was his victory. And this, finally, was his peace. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Roderick and Laura's story has deeply touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of rebuilding courage and unconditional love, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what moment touched you most in this narrative. Every day, we bring intense stories like this, which reveal the truest and most transformative side of the human soul, showing that it is always possible to start anew when we have love and determination. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode with a new story that will stir your emotions.